All right, I think we are live for another hobby stream, and I guess today I'm happy to say, well, I'm joined by my brothers. We also have a guest, Valbjorn, with your. I think as of late, over the past, I don't even know how long it's been. The past few years, you've really made I feel a big name for yourself in like the Inc. 28 40K community with all of your intricate sculpting and like um, more accurately scaled like weapons and blades and such. And
I
I'm
think all throughout 40K in general,
yeah,
honestly,
like I'm
you've
very
made a
excited
big
to chat with
splash.
you because um, I've been very
Well, I'm
impressed
excited to
with your
chat with
work.
you guys too. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I'm glad
And
you're here.
yeah, I'm glad to be here. Finding your page and looking at the work that you guys are doing has influenced me in terms of the way I was scaling some of my barrels, like doing some of those kit bashes on the
Oh
weapons.
yeah.
I think I actually spoke to maybe Eric about
hmm
what size brass tube
hmm
to buy
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
for some of those guns. But yeah, it's been a pleasure, sort of really digging down and trying to look deeper and going smaller and smaller.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
feel.
feel you are one of the first people that like we came across that does have such a focus on that kind of element of realism while still maintaining some elements of kind of the heroic nature of like space Vikings ultimately, but by emphasizing the scale of like their little tooth necklaces or their weapons and such, I think does a good job of refocusing on like the character rather than like, wow, that's a big frost axe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I love that contrast between the hero scale and some of the more grittier realism, just with the little teeth and even
hmm
just changing the style. For me, a big one was changing the style of the fur.
Hmm
I
Yeah.
was never quite happy with the Games Workshop style fur. It fits that world and sort of that form factor. But as I started to play with green stuff and broke away from the press mold and started to sculpt
hmm
my own fur, I started doing the pelts or the actual leather first and then the fur on top, and I started to see these different layers and contrasts between the all the smooth ceramite plastic armor and everything and the organic looking leather, and that's where I really started to kind of fall in love with trying to contrast the realism and the more kind of
Yeah,
cartoony
that's
looking hero scale. Yeah.
uh-huh. Yeah, well, I'm excited to chat more about this. I guess with that in mind, maybe we want to just start the podcast portion of this such that we don't kind of retread ground here. If
That makes
people are
sense.
good
I
with
think,
that, I can
yeah,
start
that makes sense.
start the intro again.
Oh yeah,
Nice.
All
yeah.
right, yeah. So I'm gonna start recording then. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dragged into Turbolasers, a miniature wargaming podcast from the people behind the blog Between the Bolter and Me. I'm your host, Eric Wire, and I'm here with my two brothers, Adam Wire,
Hey, everybody.
Greg Wire,
Hey everyone.
and I'm incredibly excited to have a guest with us today. And this guest is perhaps the greatest creator of space wolves on the planet,
Oh my
as you might know him as Valbjorn on
God.
Instagram. Nice to have you here.
I don't think
It's
anyone can dispute that.
Or at least the best, the coolest space wolves to our tastes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fair. That's
well,
fair.
thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, really, really happy to have you. And yes, I'm sure most people listening to you are aware of your the spatials you create and how you have more of an effort to create realism in them and like looking at scale more precisely. And
Mhm.
ultimately, I think the spatials you create shift them away from kind of the Viking caricatures that they often can be portrayed as, both through artwork and even some of the models. And I feel, for me, for a while, I didn't really even like the Space Wolves that much because they seemed so caricatured. But
Mm.
some, like Dan Abnett has some good Space Wolf novels, and some of the Horus Heresy stuff, I think, did a good job of trying to carve out a space that isn't so like cartoony, riding big wolves and Santa Claus sleds and so forth.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
think your work, in my mind, is the best that I've seen to capture that gritty realism.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's what I'm shooting for when I'm sculpting and adding all my little parts to the minis and stuff. For me, it was what's the book? The Emperor's Gift. I was looking up on my bookshelf there. That was the book
Mhm.
that recommended by a good buddy, Ralph, who kind of influenced my sculpting style. I found this other guy, Ralph, on Reddit, and we still talk all the time. He's a good friend of mine now. But I discovered his sort of wild hair that he was sculpting. I'm like, how are you doing that?
Uh-huh.
And so we got to talking, and he made a tutorial that I watched and kind of adapted his style and just sort of took it my direction. But he was like, you got to read The Emperor's Gift by Aaron Dembski Bowden. It's mostly about Grey Knights, but the whole second half of the book is about the months of shame with the Space Wolves. And you
Okay.
get this crazy, gritty, realistic, just like these warriors that just don't screw around. And there
Mhm.
wasn't anything, kind of funny or over the top about them. It was just badass Vikings in space.
Yeah, okay.
And yeah, since reading that, I mean, I'll grab any kind of Aaron Dembski Bowden novel I can to just dig into. Night Lord's Omnibus, I love that.
Yeah, he's
Um,
one of their best.
yeah,
I'll
but
be
that sort of
honest.
writing style and looking at the illustrations from the older codexes, like the
Yeah.
second and third edition codexes with the David Gallagher artwork.
Mhm.
Just
Classics.
yeah, that's a huge influence on my style. So
Man, the cover, or at least the current cover artwork for The Emperor's Gift, isn't very good.
oh
I feel a lot of the
But
Black Library stuff varies a lot in their quality.
but there's a quote on the cover from Dan Abnett saying Aaron Dembski Bowden is heretically good.
yeah.
That's great. Well, as to give some context, like, how did you get involved in this miniature hobby? Is it something you've been doing for a while? And as kind of a facet of that, have you always been into Space Wolves? Or is it just
Um,
that book?
well, let's see. I'll just start kind of at the beginning. When I was a youngster, Hero Quest was my intro into the hobby.
Nice.
Playing that with my brother and my dad as the DM or the game master, the dungeon master, was seeing the minis and rolling the dice. That was it for me. I was like, okay, this is what I want to get into, right?
Yeah.
Then of course, video games got good
Yeah.
through the '90s. Um, uh, and that was right through the '90s. I was playing mostly video games, but when I got out of college, or when I was in college, I discovered Warhammer Fantasy Battles and collected some Bretonians and some Chaos slaves to Chaos guys, like Chaos Knights and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, which kind of bloomed my first kit bash, which was um, Marauders, which are on these like little wimpy ponies. The
Yeah.
Chaos Marauders kit bashed onto the back of Hounds of Chaos, those weird looking like warg dogs.
Yeah.
Uh, and none of the Marauders really had beards, so I did the beards on them. Did some
Mhm.
little saddles. Yeah, so I collected those for a while. Started getting into green stuff. That was like early 2000s, like 2004 ish, and then sort of faded away for a little while, and then picked it back up about 10 years later when I found the Space Wolf Terminator Wolfguard kit. I saw that on the shelves, and I was like, all right, like I'm gonna try to get into 40K now.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I bought a bunch of Terminators and started like just mashing them all together and stuff. And this was before I was onto any kind of social media platform or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I was just piddling around with that for years. And then 2019, like right before COVID hit, it was the Indominus box that came out that really like lit a fire under everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's jumping back in, and I picked up the Indominus box and decided I'm going to start posting some stuff on Instagram. And I don't know what came over me, but because I'm not a shy person, but I'm not very outgoing when it comes to a
Yeah.
presence online. And so when I post my work, or it's mostly just about the work. Of course, I say
Mm-hmm.
that right as you're scrolling by pictures of me like holding a little axe or whatever. um, but that was a real coming out of my shell moment. Posting stuff on Instagram and having it be well received by a community that I didn't even really knew existed, or
Yeah.
knew that it was so big. I had no clue that the community was so big. And then I'm talking to mostly Europeans most of the time, and most of my I'm just talking to people all over the world, and it was just kind of blowing my mind how many people were into the same thing. We all loved trying to figure out little puzzles, putting stuff together.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, where'd you get that kit from? Like, I started to gravitate towards this community of people that like to kit bash and sculpt and learn and stuff like that. And meeting you guys and other people in those same circles was just a huge life changer for me. I was just like, okay, and like this is a lot of fun. So that was
Yeah.
kind of my hobby journey to where I'm at now. So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I feel the community aspect of it is wonderful, and we kind of started this blog and that sort of thing kind of when we went into graduate school, just as a way to, I don't know, just chronicle the stuff we were doing, and was amazed how quickly people start commenting and we start connecting with people both through the blog and Instagram and such. And yes, kind of you mentioned how widespread it is, and that you'd be talking from people from all aspects all over the world and so forth, getting different perspectives and ideas and such. And I think that's super cool. And it also is just inspiring and kind of pushes you to keep trying your best and also see what other people are doing and try to incorporate that. So I think that's really cool.
yeah, for me, I hadn't really even left the country. I grew up in the Midwest,
Yeah.
in central Illinois. My graduating class was 27 kids.
Nice.
So like total country boy, just growing up in rural, Midwest.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until this year that I took my first trip outside the country to go up to Canada to the mini wargaming bunker.
Oh,
Uh,
that's cool. Yeah.
and it was really special for me. It was like it was
Mm-hmm.
important. I had never had the desire to travel outside the country, or I've always been just pretty content within my own circle
Yeah.
of life.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until getting involved with this community that I realized, like, God, I want to be everywhere. I want to travel to all these countries where all these people that I've met and hang out and maybe even teach a class here or there, or take classes here and there, and just like really expand myself. So it's pretty cool. It's really impacted my life in a positive way.
I mean, I can think the three of us can say exactly the same thing. Like, if you would have told me 20 years ago that, well, in the future, the three of you guys are going to go to a bunch of different countries because of Warhammer and little miniatures, like, I wouldn't have believed that. And now
Right.
most of the traveling that we have done is because of Warhammer stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So have you guys been to events overseas and stuff like that?
Yeah, so the first, like, I guess real, like, Inc. 28 event we went to We went to England and Warhammer World to play in like an Inc. 28 event called the Pilgrim, and
Mm.
that was, I feel, one of our first big involvements with other people in the community. And then since there, I feel every few years or so, and I feel it's maybe picked up a little more now that COVID is not quite what it
Yeah.
was. We've done a little bit more, but so we were in England for that. We then went to Finland for the like 20th anniversary of Mordheim, and then we've been to various parts of the United States for other like Mordheim or Inc. 28 events. So yeah, I feel most of our traveling has at least in part been directed by going to meet other people from all over the world to just kind of hang out and look at each other's miniatures and discuss the different
Yeah.
finer and interesting points of that. So I feel I would certainly say I don't think I would be nearly as invested or interested in the hobby had it not been for the increased like interaction with the other people and other like-minded hobbyists. And I feel
Yeah.
well, for us it started mostly with the blog. I feel with the advent of Instagram and some of the other social media things, that's really been a nice means to contact and interact with other people in a way that's much easier than like going through like message boards or trying to send emails back and forth
Emails.
between people. So like yeah, it's changed things a lot, and I think it's allowed people to more easily realize like, oh, I've been looking at this person's stuff for years, like, you know what, I can send them a message and maybe they'll actually say something to me. And I think that has done has been an important thing with I think making at least some people or most people realize anyone can be involved in it.
Yeah, and everyone's accessible.
Yes.
Most everyone's accessible in the community. There's so many people that I meet that are new that are shy, and that's how I started out as well. Just not really reaching out to people that I admired. Just think, why would they care about what I have to say? And
Yeah.
that's like that dissolves so quickly, and it's not until you tell them like just just reach out and say hi. It's that easy, and then you've got a relationship started, and you can start chatting and asking questions, and you take it as far as you feel it out. So
yeah, like the worst that could happen is they just don't read your
they
message
they
and
don't
ignore
respond.
it.
Yeah.
And then like, I mean, you tried. It didn't
Yeah,
really
that's whatever.
cost you much. I mean, maybe you'll have some anxiety about it or something. But I think for the most part, almost everyone that I've sent messages to in the hobby community, they're happy to respond. And like, even if it's just like, thanks, man, and that's good.
Yeah,
That's
I feel
nice.
people are just excited to have other people excited about the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yep. There's a lot of common ground between everybody.
Well, and obviously we've mentioned you kind of focus on Space Wolves and converting and scale. How did some of that become your focus? Like, since being involved in the hobby, have you always kind of been focused on converting and such? Has that been a major aspect of the hobby for you?
Yes. Building the metal kits when they were out, like I was being forced to pin things to get it to actually work, using green stuff just to make a limb look the way it's supposed to look because the cast didn't really come out right. Um, and having a background I have my bachelor's in ceramics, and so I'm very much tuned into physical things that I can touch and mold. my
Mhm.
parents are ceramic artists, they're potters, and
That's
they've been
cool.
so I kind of grew up in their studio, just like
Mhm.
they worked from home. That's what they did, and I could go out in the studio and just start sculpting anytime I wanted, or just making little
Oh,
mushrooms
that's
or little
cool.
men or whatever. Yeah, and so that has always been a huge drive for me to try to make things my own. And so when I saw
Mhm.
these kits that are on these sprues and you cut them all out with the different parts, and it, buying those. Speaking of Space Wolves, just buying the Terminator kit and just the Gray Hunter Space
Mhm.
Wolf pack has so many
Mhm.
extra parts that it comes with, and you're just like, okay, well now I got to cut these up, and it felt really natural to me to want to try to create unique things, and
Yeah.
so when I started in working with the old metal figures, when I started working with plastic, I'm like, oh god, this is so easy to
This
work
is a
with
lot
compared to the
nicer.
metal. Yeah, and so yeah, finding the right tools and having a background in kind of a 3D
Mhm.
medium has just really kind of turned me toward that side of the hobby. And because of the work that I'm posting on Instagram, it obviously has kind of helped gravitate other people that are into that towards me, and me towards
Mhm.
them. And so it's helped me, like discovering you guys and seeing the different changes you would do to like scale the weapons down to their sizes. And
Mhm.
some of the there was a particular Marine that you guys did where you changed Primaris Mark 10 armor into Mark 7 armor just by changing a few of the form factors on the legs,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
like getting rid of the discs on the ankles
Mhm.
and removing the bonnet above the knee was just like, wow, okay. It, before I was a little bit um, unguided, I guess. I didn't really care about what I was making in terms of lore and stuff like that with
Yeah.
Yeah.
armor marks. Um, but the more I started to get into finding other accounts that I would pull inspiration from, a big one being my friend Andrew, suspended animation membrane or sus.an.membrane on
Oh
Instagram.
yeah,
Fi-
Yeah.
he's great.
Finding his work was it just a huge eye opener for me. I was just like, okay, I thought I was working delicately. I had
Mhm.
no clue what delicacy was until I discovered his page and just saw that, like, if he needs to make a power cable that's so small to represent something inside the body or like on the waist armor or something, he was like wrapping copper wire
Mhm.
around a brass rod and moving it, and I was like, okay, I need to dial it in even further. And so it's been finding that balance that I really, really enjoy. I'm totally on a tangent right now. I forget where we started.
Just talking about how you got into conversions and also scale and such. And yeah, I
Yeah,
think that
there you go.
by being able to find other people like Susa Membrane and see like how they're approaching this is really good for just giving you ideas of how to go
Totally.
about conversions and like even stuff like, oh, well, what size brass tubing do you use? Like what materials are actually good and malleable at this scale? Because as
Hmm.
I'm sure anyone who tries to do kit bashes will learn, like just seeing a picture of a kit online doesn't necessarily mean like that head will look good or those weapons will look good or the hands and such. So being able to chat with somebody about kind of their techniques, what scale of like little fine chain, jeweler's chain might be scaled with models, like stuff like that
Yeah,
really helps having a person to chat with and see what they've had success with. So,
yeah.
um, towards that end, what you do obviously a lot of sculpting. What sort of modeling putty do you use, and has that been something that has shifted over time? I I imagine it
Absolutely.
had,
Yeah.
partially from other people's suggestions. I know from like our experience, we've kind of shifted over the years, but it'd be
Yeah.
interested to hear how what your journey has been.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey. I started out with pure green stuff. and I was working with exclusively with just green stuff, mostly through like 2010s and stuff. And then when I started to post on Instagram, I was still working with pure green stuff. And when I discovered Ralph's work, he goes by Ralph.the.reasonable on Instagram. We can throw links up and stuff later.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
he after chatting with him, he was like, try using green stuff, but don't put as much blue in. Just at like 3-to-1, yellow to blue.
Yeah.
And it makes it green stuff never really changing the ratio of the catalyst and the resin obviously will affect the cure, how hard it cures.
Mm-hmm.
But with green stuff, it doesn't really matter because it never cures all the way hard enough to mess with once it's
No, it
dry.
doesn't.
And so changing that ratio was huge for me. That really started to push me in the direction that that put my hair kind of where I was comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And then I started to get into other putties for more hard-edged sculpting, like milliput,
Yeah.
just because I knew I wanted to do some hard-edged stuff, and I was never quite happy with sculpting hard-edged things with soft putty. I always needed it to be cured and sandable, so I could then
The
come in with hard.
ability to sand helps
Exactly. And so, I went down that path and looking at different tutorials, and that mixing green stuff and milliput was big. And since then, Magic Sculpt has been I've shifted over and used a lot of Magic Sculpt recently. It's a lot like milliput, but it's has a different base to it. I think it's styrene based instead of clay based. They both break down in water. So they're both they're both water soluble. Milliput is a lot more. It'll like turn into a paste really
like
easily.
A silt.
A silt, yeah. Magic Sculpt will also do that, but it's a lot slower.
Who makes Magic Sculpt? Is that Tamiya's thing, or what's Tamiya's thing?
No, it's Wesco is who makes Magic Sculpt, and I think they have it's Magic Sculpt with a T on the end if it's the U.S. and it's Magic Sculpt if it's in
nice.
the UK.
I've certainly heard a lot of people use that. That's one of the putties I've not used. I feel over the years I've certainly moved around between different things. I feel most people have started with green stuff and eventually realize that there are tons of other putties with slightly different properties that really, some of them really work much nicer for certain effects and things than
absolutely
and the notion that you can mix them to change the properties and everything. So that's one of the big things that I really like to tell people. There are so many things out there, and even just changing some of those putties, you can almost like overnight become a better sculptor just because the stuff is like so much easier to work with, or even if
not sticking to your tools as much.
And the notion that things hardening enough that you can sand or carve away with an X-Acto blade or something, that I think goes a long way, because even if you don't do something perfectly in the initial sculpt, you can then just go back to it and sand it down, reshape it, and you're not going to ruin it, I guess.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest stigmas with sculpting from beginners that I talk to, is they're always afraid because they don't want to mess up their models they spend so much money on. Well, I spent all this money. I'm afraid to mess them up. And with green stuff in particular, if you mess up, just wait for it to cure and just pop it off. Like
it's not
pop
hard.
right back off. It's not too big of a deal, and unless you get something like milliput in an undercut, like something where it can't come off, like you can pretty much pop it off. But I absolutely love getting into the properties of the different putties. I have an entire video on the Patreon just called "Understanding Epoxy Putty," and I sat down to try to make a beginner video, right? So like something that anybody could come in and and have a better understanding of what they want to use moving forward, because I don't feel like sure, there are different mixtures that might be easier to work with for different tasks, but
Yeah.
I believe that every tool in the toolbox, whether it's pure green stuff or all these other putties, like they all have their place to be used, and they all have their
Yeah.
strength. And understanding all those properties separately and how you can mix them to get different things, I just poured all that into one video and just focused on it.
Yeah,
So
no,
that
that's
way I have
good.
something that's a reference. If you want to learn about putty, you want to jump in and have a ground zero experience and come out of it better. Like I needed that. That's actually hung me up about a month on releasing my Patreon, because I wanted that video to be right. And it took me about a month to put it together and edit it, even though it's like I'm doing tutorials. I do one every week now, and I feel like I have so much more of a like I can wrap my head around my concept and execution of a tutorial video. But that particular video was
Yeah.
so
Uh-huh.
tough for me because it had so much condensed in one. And I'm actually looking forward to redoing it at the beginning of next year, just to give myself a year of experience in between making it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm going to make that video every year, just
That's
to
a good
see what
idea.
changes. Yeah, just because it's like every time I sit down and I mix putty up, I feel like I'd learn just something a little bit different than what I
Yeah.
started with before. So
No,
And
I
I
think
think
for me,
also
that's the
probably
chase. Yeah.
approaching it from that, like wanting to make a comprehensive video, kind of forces you to perhaps learn a little bit more, put some of your thoughts down, and I think is has to be beneficial to you even a little bit in thinking about ways to
Huge.
describe it as well as just show it in a convincing way.
I also
It's
sort of
yeah.
I also sort of feel like some of the like lessons that have taken a lot of us who've sculpted a while years to learn, like a lot of it, like I feel I can't say it enough, some of the things, because there are new people coming on all the time, and the notion that like do something to lubricate your tools, there are different putties out there, you don't just have to use green stuff. Like I feel you could say it literally in all of your videos and all of your posts,
Hmm.
and like people would be coming to it like asking those same questions and everything. And I think, yeah, you just there's a lot of important information out there that you just can't say it enough. And
And I feel
Yeah.
until people try to do it, um, it will always be kind of a challenge. But I feel if you do have some basic knowledge about it, you'll probably be a little bit more successful with it and more likely to kind of push yourself to try to do new things, which I think is nice that you have this body of work showing like tutorials and such to help people and show them that like you're not going to be as skilled as you are overnight, but if you practice it and try it, like I think most people would be surprised at what they can achieve.
Yeah. Yep. It's just about mixing it up and putting it on and just trying to get into the zone. And yeah, for me
Well, I guess.
it was meditative for me, really getting into my own head. And that's
Hmm.
when like I started to really feel what was happening in front of me, and that I couldn't I would get into sculpting, but it wasn't until I had those, like I would get into sculpting during a hobby session, but it wasn't
Hmm.
until I had a session where I was really got my head into it and like hit the flow state where you got the music playing and you're just really in the zone. And it's that kind of meditative relaxation that kind of kept me coming back and also keeping me improving. And
That's great. Well, we've now mentioned kind of videos and Patreon and such. I guess maybe we can address that more formally. Yeah, like you have your own YouTube channel with a few tutorials, and more recently you've started to release a lot of content through Patreon. Can you just chat a little bit about that, how you decided to start making tutorial videos and how that's
Mhm.
going?
Yeah, my initial YouTube tutorials came about several years ago when I started to modify the Indominus box Marines, and I was doing my hair and beards, and it was really well received, and people wanted to know how I was doing it. I was like, well, go watch Ralph's video, that's how I learned. And eventually I just ended up making my own, and it was so I balanced my phone on my magnifier, and it was like hanging off the edge of my magnifier, hit and record, and I just sat there and did it. It was a half-hour video or something, just talking live through it. And watching it again, it's a little clumsy, but it's at least it's kind of sincere, where I'm just like, okay, well, you want to see what I'm doing? Let's just go after it. And it ended up coming across
good content's
really,
good content.
Yeah, I think it dispelled a lot of that fear that people had, because they didn't see flashy cuts and like high production stuff. They just saw it happen in front of them. Just mix it up, put it on, and start pushing it around. It's that easy. And just follow a few of these guides, like just watch how I'm holding the tool, pay attention to that hairline, like watch how each time your tool hits the putty, it starts to create all of these marks that start to influence each other, and you create these really naturalistic looking textures. Just explaining that as I'm doing it sort of, I think, dispelled some of that fear that they had to try it themselves. And that was the biggest feedback I got from that video, was people just saying, hey, it just made it so approachable. I wanted to just try it right after I watched the video. I wanted to go try it myself. And so that was a big boost for me to make a few more. And I did a few, like some barrel wraps was pretty well received, and some pelts. And after I did those videos, I kind of felt like, okay, I put my work in, you know how I do my stuff. Now I just want to go and focus again on learning. And I spent a year or two just hunkering down and trying to improve my skill. And just get to a place where I was happy with, in terms of the work that I was producing. And at that point, I was starting to get a pretty decent following. And I started to really ask myself, because I just was thinking about sculpting all day long, just laying in bed before I went to sleep, and just like, not in a haunted way, but in a good way, where I'm trying to puzzle out and problem solve, and I still do it now, where I'm just, how do I get this to look like that? How do I layer this to say what I want it to say? And I really dug down deep, and I was like, do I want to do this? Could I do this all the time? And yes, I could do this all the time. And so I'm like, well, okay, let's really consider how I can become a full-time artist and teacher, because I was really starting to get into these relationships I was forming with people through Instagram and other platforms that I had been sharing my work through, and enjoying watching them grow as artists and seeing their work, and how that would influence me. Like, sometimes the questions that people ask me will get me to think about something completely different that would have never crossed my mind before. It's this completely new perspective. And that to me was really important. And so, I set myself a little deadline of, okay, next 2023, that's going to be the year. I'm going to do this Patreon thing. I'm going to do it right. So I sat down, and that lone wolf with his arms spread out, the chainsword and shield, I built him in January, and recorded every single step. I mean, I just have gigs of video of him being built and recorded, just every single scrape and file mark, everything. I'll have to put I'll send you the screenshot of the folder of organized videos of everything from that guy. It's wild. But so I had all this library of footage that I built up to then pump out these tutorials, and that's been my goal this year, is to just like do a tutorial every Friday, just build up this massive library of really useful, like, sort of entry level and advanced techniques that you can kind of dip in and out of, and let my interaction with my patrons kind of guide what they want to see and stuff like that. And I launched in February, and it's July now, and I have, I believe, over 150 people signed up. So it's been a really awesome launch. People coming on and just meeting new people, and we have a Discord now. Well, the Discord launched with it, but there's always people on there just posting their work, and
there are people there now.
there are people there now. Yeah, it's great.
That's
It's
nice.
just it's been good. I do plan on. I think it's important if I really want to do this for real, and continue to grow my audience. Instagram's Instagram's a really slow grind, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's tough to get a bunch of followers on Instagram, and so I need to kind of diversify what I'm doing. I feel like some YouTube videos are important to kind of diversify my audience, bring more people into the Patreon. So I'm sort of planning that out.
I know a bunch of people do that, like Richard Gray. He will periodically have a kind of a tutorial thing, painting thing on his YouTube thing, but has just more in depth and more videos on Patreon. Because I think it would be a good way to branch out to kind of show people, I guess, sort of the quality of the work you're doing and the stuff you are doing now compared to what you had, and just what is changing, I think would be good. But I think the Patreon model in general is quite good because you have that more direct interaction with like your patrons and can have more flexibility. But Instagram's slow. You're getting into those threads.
Oh my
I don't
god.
know if you've heard of Instagram's new Twitter. I think it's called Threads. Yeah,
I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I did
get all those
cross.
followers from Threads.
Yeah, I
did
that.
sign
It's
up
probably
for
not a
Threads,
great
but
decision.
I posted one thing, and I'm like, okay, I'm here now too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really know what to do. I figured
There's always another social media.
It seems that way. Well, I think certainly
Get
having
in
the
on those TikTok
content
videos too.
and actually putting something out once a week, that's a tremendous effort, and I think that's part of the reason you've been as successful as you are with such a short time with the Patreon, is because I think people realize they really can get a lot out of it, and they're excited to see kind of whatever it is you're doing next. And like, I feel a lot of the accounts that I follow, it's not necessarily even to get the different content, it's more or less just, I know, like, I want to support different content creators because I just like seeing what they're working on and what they're going to do next. So
yeah.
But I think all the content you're putting out through that does add, I feel, a lot of value, which is good, particularly when people are trying to get into this aspect of the hobby and they want to learn as much as they can and feel like there are people they can chat with to learn and ask questions. I think that's helpful. So it seems like you're building a really positive community, which I think is great.
Yeah, that's super important for me to have that kind of hobby positivity, especially in the Discord. It's been amazing so far. That no complaints from me, and even just being on Instagram, I'm always very careful to try to only put out positive energy and learning and all that kind of excitement. And I've been fortunate to have only received that back, and it just goes to show you that, we've got a great little community going. And so it's been good, kind of just like digging into that. Yeah. But I want to, each time I put out these videos, like I said, it's important to have a big library of stuff to choose from. But one thing I'm trying to focus more on is when I make a tutorial, it's more than just the subject, like more than just filling gaps in models or whatever. There's more lessons built into each one. I try to kind of really, for me, I seem like I'm beating a dead horse sometimes when I'm explaining things, but I do think it's helpful when you're learning to know why everything is happening the way it's happening, like how I'm holding the model in a certain way, how I'm holding the tool, like watch the way the marks are happening. All that stuff is at any point in that, because I kind of know where my breakthroughs happened when I watched other people work. And so I'm hoping that by watching these videos in any fashion, even if you don't want to make a sword, by watching the sword tutorial and watching how I do the wrap or the pommel or whatever, like maybe it'll spark something else of a project that you're doing to
I think
just turn something on you didn't consider. Yeah,
I think that's a very good point, because you never really know when the moment will be right for someone to kind of like really make a realization for like, you know what, like I really should try that, or I really should do something a slightly different way, or that was a really good idea, that's really clever. Because I feel it's very easy to brush things off and say like, oh, whatever I have is fine, or like what I've been doing is fine, I don't need to lubricate my tools or something like that.
Did we lose somebody?
I think
We
we
lost
might have
Eric.
lost
we lost
Eric.
Eric.
Yeah, there he
Wait.
is.
I don't know.
Hey, Eric.
Frustrating.
How is that affecting the recording? Like
I
we
mean,
presumably lost like
there. I feel I will obviously cut some of this out, but I will probably also get the audio from the video, and if there's short portions that I have to use that from
Did you start a new recording?
there, I will do that. It's just been going straight through.
Okay, very good.
Although some of it is just recording nothing as I wait for the internet connection to return.
Nice.
So always professional here.
All good.
But I think it's fine. I should be able to, because it was fine on your end, I assume.
Yeah.
All
From
right. So
everything I could
I'll
tell.
just also, as I said, get the audio from the video as well, and if there are sections that didn't come through, I'll just use that.
Well, so I have.
But
I have some questions. So I love, and more recently, you've been posting smaller swords that you've been experimenting with shapes and sizes and stuff, and like I adore a lot of those, because I think we've become so used to kind of like the oversized club-like swords that Space Marines have carried. Yeah, like they just, I don't know. Like I've gotten so tired of seeing like, oh, that's a pretty cool Space Marine, and then it's like, but like what the fuck are they holding? And just like they would look so much nicer if it was scaled back. And I'm very happy you're doing that with the different swords and axes and stuff, because I feel people have become so accustomed to the oversized Space Marine stuff that I feel they're even like, it almost seems like people are apologists and saying like, oh, like if it wasn't like that you wouldn't know what it was, and like it's just not true. Like you can tell like, oh, that's a frost weapon, or that's a power sword, or that's like, this stuff doesn't have to be the way that it's typically presented. And my gosh.
I'm glad you like the skinny swords, because I enjoy making them, and I think it gives it a whole different flavor when you throw one of those weapons on there. Yeah,
it really does. Because I think
I've been. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it looks like what a sword actually should look like, and not what perhaps somebody who's played Warhammer for a while just accepts a sword to be. It actually looks like it's thin and sharp, like it would actually be, which is great.
Yeah. When I set out to make those, I was trying to stay within the dimensions and kind of the form of a sword that would be at that scale. So,
and because like
I used Go ahead.
Because I feel like almost everyone, if they would look at like some of these space wolves, like there's no question like what they're carrying. Like no one's going
Oh,
to
right.
think like,
Yeah.
or very few would be like, oh, that should be 4 times larger or whatever. Like that looks stupid. Like I struggle to think anyone would think that. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, there is the argument that the bigger ones are easy to paint, though, right?
But I I don't think that's even true. It's
But
like these are
there's more
smaller and there's
surface area
less
to
to
paint
paint.
it.
Like that's great.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
It's like they're
Yeah.
just nice, smooth, flat, functional. Like I can just put some silver on that, like put a wash, perfect.
Bam, little lead belcher with null oil over it, and you're good to
Yeah.
go, baby.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
Also,
man.
a
Easier
related
to edge
question.
highlight.
Yeah, a related question. So you've certainly done some work with their like firearms and stuff like that, replacing the barrels with like brass and whatnot. Do you have any plans to make like smaller bolt pistols and other stuff like that?
I mean, yes.
Hell
I
yeah.
yeah, I was just talking the other day to a patron of mine, Olfram, about bolt
Mm-hmm.
pistol size. He had made some blood claws and switched out all of the heavy bolt pistols with the
Just the
old,
standard, yeah.
the standard bolt pistol size, and just changing that little thing on
Goes a
the
long way.
Primaris. It looked so much more deadly somehow. Like it was just
Yeah.
scarier looking. The details were a little bit finer.
Mm-hmm.
It just when you hold up a heavy bolt pistol, it's the size of a regular bolter,
Oh yeah,
a
no,
regular
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
firstborn bolter. Yeah,
Also, I
and
know,
so
yeah, it's
yeah,
it's remarkable. Well,
yeah,
I
I
mean,
like that smaller bolt
yeah.
pistol style.
Well, in one of the tutorials that I made a while ago, like I literally took one of the heavy bolt pistols and converted it into like a smaller bolter, like a standard bolter. And I mean, they work
Yeah.
pretty well for that. And I
Hmm.
think just like the swords and axes and stuff, I I feel in most cases like people aren't going to mistake what those are so long as you keep or maintain like some of the general detailing and shape that the
Oh
weapons
yeah,
have. So,
yeah,
and
The
again,
silhouette.
yeah, the silhouettes and stuff like that. And again, I feel it also, particularly with your models, how many like little details you put into like their hair and like the things on them, like that really sort of allows you to look a little closer at the model and think more about them as kind of a character or an actual individual rather than just like some game piece that like, oh
yeah,
that's a space warrior or whatever, like. And
yeah.
I think all of those things really gets you to focus a little more on whatever character or persona they actually hold. And yeah, you can really actually start asking questions and wondering like, oh, I wonder how they got this or that, and like I really like that.
Yep. Yeah, smaller bolt pistols.
Yeah,
Key.
Do you
It's key.
do you play the game? Have you played the game
I have.
recently? My
I
goodness.
haven't played recently. I've watched a game of 10th between a couple buddies. It was just a
Mm-hmm.
500 point combat patrol. Um, but I played through the end of 8th and then in the beginning of 9th, and I really enjoyed it. But I didn't like the length of the games. And I was playing Total Kitchen Table. It was just my buddy and I, Orcs versus Space Wolves. And we had a blast. We built all of our own terrain, and I'll have to
nice.
get some of those pictures for you guys because we did kind of a crazy, like Mad Maxy Mars world, and based our
That's
minis
cool.
on all the same.
Mm-hmm.
And of course,
That's
he had
nice.
all the buggies and everything, and we built an
Mm-hmm.
overpass and just all that stuff, right? And so having a friend that would get into the flavor as much as I would allowed me to really love the actual game. I tried to play at some game stores, and it was just a little too much for me at the time. I was more into the narrative stuff, and like we would play ranked and match rules and stuff like that, but we were still pretty loose. But since getting so much into sculpting and kit bashing and taking a month or two on each individual model, I haven't really had time to play. But I've got a 2,000 point army of just old painted models that I can sling around if I want to play. Yeah.
Well, I feel depending on what your interests and stuff are, like just walking in a game store and trying to get a game, like I feel you're unlikely to find another individual that will like sort of value and be as interested in the certain things that maybe you are. And so
it's harder to click and find that connection, right?
And I mean, maybe you could eventually get to that point, but it's much harder. And I feel, now most of the things that we've played has been with events with other kind of like-minded individuals that we've come together through Instagram and the blog and other stuff like that. So
definitely.
What about you guys?
Well, now
do you play?
That the new edition, Leviathan's here, are you excited? You gonna play that? Maybe make a small kill team like thing of your better looking space wolves and play it?
I would love to. Like I said, playing the 2,000 point games was just a little rough on my body. My feet would hurt after a game.
It's a lot.
But now that there's, I guess, some more rules for smaller forces, I may try to do a combat patrol or just what's the 1,000 point game, incursion or something. Yeah. I might try to build a little force that I can play with. But yeah, real casual. But yeah, I'll probably dink around and roll some dice in 10th for sure.
Nice. So we play a little bit. Most of it is just, as we said earlier, every so often we'll go to an event or something and play something. I have a group of people that once every other week will play some miniature based game. For a while now we've been playing Warcry. And that's been fun. We played the last edition of Warhammer 40,000 for a while, and that I feel that had been the first time I really played since maybe college, and
5th or something.
Yeah, like 5th edition to 9th, and I mean, I had some fun with it, I'll admit, but I don't feel my heart was in it, because since when I was playing then to like now, so much of my effort has been put into like working on like one model for 2 months or something, that pushing around 2,000 points of like models that you maybe didn't put as much effort into and you didn't really care a whole lot about. My heart really wasn't in it, and I didn't. I all at the same point didn't really have a well-crafted army either, so that probably made it a little less fun too. And I would much rather play a game with like 5 or 6 models or like Kill Team or something where I have a little bit more control over what I'm using and it's easier to instill like your own interesting ideas and whatnot. And if you're playing with other people, there's a better chance that they're interested in that stuff too.
Oh yeah. I haven't played Kill Team, but it seems like it's in a pretty good spot. People seem to be happy with it.
Yeah, I think it's...
Yeah, I played a game or two. It's fun. I mean, I think just anything the excuse to use like less than 10 models is fun for me.
Absolutely.
Because I've been building up a small Force the Dark Angels over the last year or two, most of which are more of like slightly true scaled and that are painted okay. And I would like to use them in some games. Like based on my pace and just interest shifting here and there, I can't see myself ever having like a competitive, like 2,000 point army, but using it in smaller scale stuff, that it excites me.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, do you have anything that you're like really excited to do next? Obviously you have all your Patreon stuff, but do you have like a new project? Are you thinking of non-space wolf models, for example, or anything like that that you'd like to share or chat about? I know Leviathan is here, and it looks like you've started on maybe a librarian, so that's exciting.
Yeah, I have started the librarian. I am excited to work on all these new Terminators. I have I have an Abaddon kit that's been cleaned and sort of de-Abaddoned that I've had
Yeah,
just laying around.
I
Um,
understand that. I do too.
yeah, it's a amazing kit, right? And
Yeah.
it's fun to just have around to look at proportions and figure out
Mm-hmm.
where I want to change. So I've just now started getting into more of the true scale stuff where I'm extending the thighs and the waist areas, trying to like create more realistic scale.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to figure out how I want these Terminators to look.
I guess the
And
only
so,
if I can make one request,
yeah,
please,
yeah,
please don't use the storm bolters they currently have. At the very least, the very least, get some of the older plastic storm bolters that maybe they're not detailed as well, but they're at least a little smaller. Because I really like these new Terminators. Like,
yeah,
I really can't stand their weapons. I feel it cheapens everything about them. And I feel that's largely true with most of the Primaris stuff. Like, the general form of them was such a marked improvement over the older Marines, but I guess Games Workshop, and they couldn't help themselves with making, like, these are different, like, we need to make their guns even bigger, twice the size. How far can we push it? Like, what if we stuck 4 rocket launchers together? They'll still like that, right? Right? People like this, and I think that maybe whatever those were called, I don't know if anyone actually knows. I think maybe that was
oh,
finally
the
when they pushed it a little too far. I mean,
Desolation Squad, maybe.
it's some nondescript, like, like, I don't know. I think
Decimator.
people maybe started questioning it a little bit more, but like, I feel we've been questioning it for years. But yeah, please change the storm bolters, please.
I'm looking at one right now, thinking how I'm gonna alter this thing. But yeah, it seems they're like right on top, so it'd be easy to cut them off and add something else, or even just for me, the first thing that I do when I start to mod a bolter is I shave off the iron sights on the top of it. I'm like, nope,
What
these
even
guys
are
don't use iron
those?
sights.
And then even if, like, they're not even iron sights because they have a front thing, but there's not a rear
It's no
sight.
fear.
So
Yeah,
it's like, I
but there's
don't.
also a tack rail on top too,
Yeah,
like
it's just
Yeah.
I don't know. Like,
I
it's like
and I
gun
enjoy in my
detail.
head. I enjoy imagining that Space Marines have a connection to their rifle that it lets them just shoot wherever it wants to shoot,
Hmm.
right? Like they don't need to look down the barrel in order to shoot something in the head if they want to.
Or you could
Um,
also imagine that they're built and bred for war, like that is their
right.
function. So
Yeah.
their weapons are sort of an extension of themselves, and like, even if I would still imagine their weapons would have those sights and stuff, but they wouldn't necessarily use them a whole lot because they just instinctively know where they need to be and how they need to
Right. Yeah.
utilize them to accomplish their
I
goals.
I think people suggesting that they don't need sights and stuff because they would be trained to use them without them. Like, that's just giving a poor excuse for a bad design. Like, however, that being said, like, anyone who has shot a handgun enough and is familiar with it enough doesn't need to be looking down those sights to shoot where they want to shoot. So, like, the Space Marine would be talented enough and would have practiced enough with their firearms that they don't really need to focus specifically on iron sights or anything. That, I feel, is certainly true. But why they would ever manufacture something that you can't aim without, like, that's dumb. That's just making an excuse for a bad design.
Yeah,
Particularly for a galaxy that is afraid of technology, right?
That's fair. Yeah.
I
Well, and
do
then
find that just removing the sights off the top lowers the silhouette of it enough that sometimes that'll bring it down to a different scale.
that's true.
And then changing the barrel is a
Yes,
huge one, right?
that does a
That's
lot. Yeah.
it does a lot. Yeah. So
Yeah, so I feel for a lot of them, despite how big they are, there are some subtle and honestly very small things you can do that change things a lot. Like, as we were talking about earlier, even just replacing them with older versions from like the second edition, third edition Space Marines does a lot. And then though even if you don't want to do that, like cutting off the barrel and replacing it with a brass one, even if it's just slightly smaller, typically it goes a long way and really gives the whole thing a different feel. And yeah, even as you were also saying, cutting off that weird front sight thing, it really can change a lot.
yeah, I'll just take a file and file it down to the same level as the tack rail that's
Yeah.
behind it, and then you
Yeah.
keep some greeble on the top of the gun to like absorb some washes to make it look cool, but it doesn't have that weird like cowboy sight on the front.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
so
thinking
we kind
about
of got on our soapbox there,
We did.
it's all
but could
right.
you talk more about what you're doing? Like, what are you doing with the librarian? What are you excited about some of those
Oh,
models? Or
yeah. So the librarian, when I first saw that model, it's kind of hard not to make a rune priest because of the way that the chest armor is built.
Yeah.
Uh, he has the tubes going into the collar, and obviously it's like powering his psychic brain or whatever that's going on there, right? But he's covered in he's covered in these sort of demonic looking runes. And so obviously I'm like, okay, we got to fill those puppies up,
Yeah.
and
yeah,
we got to fill those up. And this is another thing that I just love about kit bashing is I love figuring out a way to do a thing that makes it look like it's supposed to be there. Or like, for instance, he has a purity seal that comes down to the side of his leg and it's absorbed into the plastic. So like there's a
Yeah.
lot of details that aren't there because the purity seal's there.
Yeah.
Well, I shaved that down and resculpted all the plastic underneath to
Yeah.
make it look like the purity seal's gone. And
Mhm.
I know that
nice.
it's the dumbest thing ever because I'm like I spend probably 3
Yeah.
hours scraping the side of this guy's leg, and I know that I'm just going to put a pelt right over the top of it. But there's something that I just love about doing that.
I understand that. Yeah.
But
You know
also
you did it. You know it's
these
there.
it's true. These mono or not monopose. Well, they are monopose, but the snap fit Marines are difficult to change the pose on, and so I find it as a challenge to try to break that mold and create something that's different than everything else that I've seen. I see it as an opportunity to
Yeah.
be unique. And so I'm excited to try to create something from this particular model that's different
Yeah.
than what you've seen out there because I'm going
Yeah.
to change the pose in a way where he's not going to be doing the same like outstretched arm with the thing out, even
Yeah.
though that
Yeah.
I do love that pose of the original model. I think it's fantastic. But by cutting him at the waist, I'm able to rotate him, and his arms are pretty accessible, so I could cut those and repose those as well. But I don't know if he's going to be a named character yet. I do have a collaboration upcoming with Roman Lapat that I'm
Nice.
really super pumped about. And our idea is pretty loose so far. It's the idea so far is a lone wolf, sort of a relaxed, natural pose. Single mini, nice looking base. He'll probably do the base. He's really good at creating atmosphere in a really small space.
Yeah, he is.
And so the librarian might turn into that project. It really depends on how it goes because he has a dome, like a hood that goes over his head. I'm going to remove that and turn it back into more of an Indominus pattern Terminator thing without the psychic hood.
Yeah.
So I can do some sort of tribal embellishment that shows more of his face. But yeah, I'm really free flowing through this librarian. I'm not really coming at it with a crazy plan.
Yeah.
But if I change the waist in a way to make it, if it feels right and it looks like a natural pose that's sort of relaxed and maybe just like standing up on top of something,
Yeah.
I may direct it towards the collaboration with Roman, but I'm letting that sort of happen really naturally because I want that to be a special piece.
That's nice. Well, I feel
Yeah, so
a lot of the Games Workshop poses, the widespread legs, like in the power metal poses. I feel those also
like really
they're really getting down there. I feel they also sort of do a disservice to the Marines as well, and like sometimes they can work, but it's tough when literally all of them are squatting down, and to have some in a more relaxed, natural pose. Like I think that they're taller looking, and they become even more imposing and like fearsome looking. And like I feel I would like to see that more from just the official Games Workshop models. But I mean, if you have the ability to just change it and do it yourself, like that's almost as good. And okay, so I'm looking forward to seeing where the project takes you. And it's nice. I like the idea of just kind of approaching it and just kind of seeing where the project takes you and how you feel it goes and where it takes you. That's nice.
I'm a bad planner when it comes to drawing out a project unless I really have an outline of what I want to do. And so compositionally, when I'm composing a piece and like figuring out where the all of his little items are going to be, it's really a free flow thing. Each thing that I do last will help inform the next version. And so that's why I don't really work too much on a plan. I do think it would be fun in the future to commission someone to do or to grab some concept art and try to stick with, like, actually try to recreate something with kit bashing and sculpting that's been an illustration or something, kind of like Will Paints did the believe it was a Grey Knight Terminator that was like striding forward, or Demon Hunter. And he's like got that big demon head, and it just like pulled the illustration right out of the codex and put it on the desk in front of him, and it's so cool looking. It's one of my favorite kit bashes.
Yeah, it's very good.
It would be fun it would be fun to try to go down that path for a few guys.
No, that would be cool. You gonna do anything with those Tyranids?
Actually, I sold them.
Also, I was gonna say,
amazing.
One of my biggest gripes with a lot of the Tyranid models are they don't really look very fierce. All of their eyes are too big, their teeth are too big, and like you do really well with small, fine, fierce-looking teeth. So I feel eventually you should find a Tyranid model and rework its face and maybe some of its claws and stuff and actually make it look fierce and cool, because you would be perfect to do it.
Oh man, thank you. Yeah, I would love to eventually get into entering Golden Demon and different competitions like that. And I
mhm,
think that uh, I would probably enter in a duel situation where I would make a couple of
mhm.
characters dueling each other, or some sort of narrative in that way,
Mhm.
and use that as a great excuse to do some cool, gnarly looking Xenos, or
Yeah,
just something else besides a Space Marine, which is what I usually do. And I love that's one thing that I love so much about the Space Wolves is how you can work so much organic
yeah,
material and sculpt
Uh-huh.
into that hard form factor of all the ceramite and everything, that you get your fantasy fix with your Space
mhm.
Marines.
That's
What's not to
true.
love. And so yeah, going full organic with a tyrannid or some type of other weird organism
Yeah,
could
it
be
would
a
be
really fun
cool.
sculpting venture. Yeah, or some crazy deformed Nurgle beast or something with like
Mhm.
boils popping out everywhere.
Mhm.
Well, yeah,
Who knows?
I feel with most of the Tyranids, if you just grind out their teeth and replace them with finer teeth, and then
Mm,
also made their eye like thinner and a little more sinister looking, or you could probably even just
mm.
remove the eyes. They'd look a lot better, and they'd look
Make them
more
Yeah,
look
like
more like xenomorphs.
yeah. Just
some of the
smooth out the head.
older art, black and white artwork and such. They
Oh,
just a
so
lot,
nasty looking.
yeah, a
Yeah,
lot nicer looking.
sharp.
I must
Just
Yeah,
say,
featured sharp everywhere.
just selling the half of the Leviathan box is probably a good move in the sense that
I just don't
you
have that
can't.
anymore. That's great.
Yeah, now you don't have that cluttering your life.
Yeah.
Like it's
Well,
so easy to accumulate more and more model kits.
uh, yeah, it's hard. I honestly, I would have probably kept them, but I had a buddy at the time that was like, "Hey, what are you doing with the other half of your box?" Because he was interested in
Oh, well, that's like, I feel that's even better, particularly if
it
they're
was,
going
yeah,
somewhere who's like they're actually really excited to do stuff with it. Because yeah, like I don't.
yeah,
Excited.
Even if you had
yep,
half a mind to do something with them eventually, like you don't need to be that precious with them, and you can
You
always
could always get
reacquire
some.
some of that stuff later. So
yeah, yeah. Buying these bigger kits like Leviathan, and I bought the which I still haven't even dipped into yet, the Black Templar
oh
set.
yeah, yeah. I don't
There,
know.
there's a
Hmm.
with the neophytes. There's a lot of interesting looking models in there that I feel like I could adapt in a cool way. Um, I really want to make a set of scouts,
Mm-hmm.
Space Wolf scouts, because they're so unique in that they're not um, novice, or what's the
Yeah,
word?
yeah,
Yeah.
Acolyte.
yeah.
They're like neophytes. That's the
And
word.
I feel the other thing that you can add, all of the official versions of the models have been verging on horrendous. Like most of them
The metal
are
ones are cool,
Are we
were
talking
not
about
the
the
wolf,
Space
but
Wolf
the Space
ones
Wolf ones. They've made official Space Wolf versions of the Scouts that I
that are
don't
bad?
oh
think
yeah, that's true.
any of them have ever
Yeah,
been good.
Well, I love the idea of
yeah, you're
scouts,
right.
and the idea of Space Wolf scouts being veterans, and
Yeah,
that
you could
weird.
do so
I
much
love,
cool stuff with them.
yeah, the just the fact of an old Space Wolf having extra just
Hmm.
tattoos or flair in some way,
Yeah,
and
you
I
could.
just love how
Hmm.
the slim the armor is on scouts. It's like built into the chest.
Cool boots too.
Yeah,
Hmm.
they got cool boots, and they're usually wearing
Yeah,
like weird like cargo pants or
yeah, you
something
could
like.
do so many really cool things with them. Um, yeah, that would be a neat thing to explore.
Yeah. But what I was saying with all these boxes is they all come with a Redemptor Dreadnought. And so I have all these Redemptor dreadnoughts just like packed up in my studio, and I've built a few of them, but it's starting to get out of hand. I feel like I could build a whole army out of them, which is I don't know. That's a tough kit. It's
Yeah.
so big, and I loved those
Mhm.
old dreads, those old boxy dreads so much that
Make Valbjorn the fail-handed.
Yeah, you could
yeah,
do that. That would be cool.
yeah, that'd be sweet.
Or you could also just decide you want to play Kill Team, and instead of normal Space Marine models, have each Space
Scouts.
Marine. No, have each Space Marine a Dreadnought instead, and just say they're Space Marines.
Yes,
Would be probably
exactly.
terrible to play because they wouldn't fit anywhere, but it would probably still be worth it. You'll get there eventually with enough of them.
Enough box sets. They'll give you
Yeah.
enough.
Enough Redemptors, yeah.
You'll get there. Just takes time. Another year or two, probably. That's all you'll need. Yeah.
Yep.
That's great.
With that said, we've been going a little over an hour now. We might want to wrap this up, but do you have any last things you'd like to say? Any like things you'd like to plug? Obviously, people should go out and look at your Patreon and Instagram, but yeah, anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah. Come check me out on Patreon, obviously. It's just patreon.com/Valbjorn. And then I'm Valbjorn on Instagram. I'm excited to start to work with polymer clay alongside all the epoxy putty that I've been learning over the past few years. And so my first venture with it is this little raven that I've been doing.
Wonderful.
That I'm almost finished with, and I see this model as my gateway into another journey that could take me into, and I know it's a small beginning of just a little bird, but it's going to be something that's completely my own. It's not from any line, like I sculpted him completely from scratch, and so it's going to open up an opportunity, at least in my mind, of trying to think in without trying to use other kits. And so
Yeah.
I'm hoping to maybe someday create my own little accessories you can buy, or my own little line of minis that you can go out and find. But yeah, that's
That's
what I'm
cool.
about.
You can try
Learning.
and make some molds and stuff like that, and cast more
Yep.
of them like that. I think could be a fun and interesting venture. And I think almost everyone I feel that have seen the Little Raven have probably fallen in love with the Raven because
Thank
they
you.
are wonderful.
Yeah. Yep. Well, thanks for having me, you guys. This was
Need
fun.
more of them.
No, it's been
Yeah,
really
Yeah, no,
nice.
thank you for joining us.
Anytime.
Always good to chat.
And also
right,
hear
yeah,
more
thanks.
about the sculpting process and everything. And I guess we could tell everybody, get out there and sculpt a little bit more. You'll be glad you did.
Yep. Start cutting up kits.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
God, my internet connection.
Don't blame Manny. Wrote a comment here about how saying that one justification for oversized swords is because small swords wouldn't be able to pierce armor, as it wouldn't have enough mass behind it to penetrate. Even if a giant sword doesn't penetrate armor at all, still goes into whatever they're hitting to potentially stagger, deform, or dislodge armor they're striking.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
feel there's certainly some validity to that. I still think in a lot of cases, GW stuff, it could be made like a third smaller, and there wouldn't be.
Oh, Eric's gone. But yeah, I think a lot of the stuff could be scaled back just ever so slightly, and it doesn't really, I don't think it would really change much of any of that.
And I mean, a lot of your smaller swords, like they're still pretty long and ultimately fairly big.
The
It's just
the Ulfbrecht sword that I made for the Instagram there is the same length as the power sword that comes with that kit. It's the exact same length. It's just skinnier
Yeah.
and
yeah.
thinner.
So I feel like in a lot of cases, it being thinner and not as fat, but it's still they're still often similar lengths. So
And also, I think a lot of it, at least for many years, was just sort of a restriction in uh, design. Like they couldn't make metal models that they could easily cast a lot, that thin, or the resin's too brittle, like the plastic too easy to break, and stuff like that. That I think probably played a component of it too. And then that larger size just sort of continued through on the lifespan, even if technology has changed a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just also
But I think,
built into the form factor of the Games Workshop style, though, right? It's all
yeah, it is.
yeah.
So we're
But that
always kind of pushing against the GW style, and like I admit that that's a thing. Like it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I think it's a fun challenge, and I think obviously you've kind of built a name for yourself kind of around that challenge of
yeah.
looking at this and showing that it is possible. And like no one is going to look at that one of your space souls and think like, oh, that's not really a space soul because his tooth necklace isn't fat enough.
Right, yeah. And that's just what I've always enjoyed is that
You know what I
challenge.
mean? Or like the beard isn't like as big or fake looking.
That beard's not big enough.
They know what it is.
Yeah.
That's funny about the size of the beard. A lot of people were coming to me after my tutorial and asking me how to make a beard of a certain size or whatever, and they were all surprised at the fact that the beard, most all of my beards don't break the gorget around the
Okay.
armor.
Yeah.
It doesn't flow down the front. There are a few that I did that are like comically big. There's one on a
Yeah.
Thunderwolf cavalry, and the model I used already had a massive beard on all the way down his chest. So I'm like, all right, we're going in.
We're
We're just
going
gonna put
for
Going
the
it.
for
beard
it.
on the whole thing. But if you look at most of my beards, they're all more
Contained.
realistic, like they
Yeah.
would actually fit inside the armor. Um,
Like
but in your
this.
mind, when you recall a space wolf or the space Viking, you're just like you imagine all this big hairy stuff, but when you go and look at it or the sculpts, they're actually not so exaggerated.
They're not
Um,
as dwarven as you might think.
right? Yeah. Well, it was also removing a lot of the wolf iconography that was all over them. For
Yeah.
me, there's so many space wolves that I've made that don't have a single wolf on them. It's just all teeth and like little skulls or ram horns or whatever. It's more
and
tribal.
even without that, like it is very like I don't think anyone would question what they're
Yeah.
supposed to
Oh,
be. Like they don't
exactly.
need
Yeah,
that.
yeah. They don't need it. Yep.
And also I feel since all of the little details aren't so big and fat, like none of your models look over like clustered with stuff or over encumbered or having too much useless detail, which is
Yeah.
nice.
Like I feel I feel that a lot of the Chaos Space Marine range as of late has suffered from some of this where they're just crammed full of
So much.
detail
Yeah.
that doesn't necessarily tell you a story or anything. It just kind of looks cluttered and overwrought.
Which, admittedly, the heavy metal paint style kind of exaggerates that in a bad way. Like, 'cause it's almost like they want to market it that, like, look at all this stuff that's in here. Look what we can do, and like that's like how I think they're directed to paint it, so you can see that. But I think in a lot of cases, if they're painted in maybe a slightly more muted way, it would lessen that almost
Yeah.
like that chaoticness. But I think your take on Spatials is a way to show, which admittedly was why some of the better Forge World models were so great. They had lots of detail, but not in a way that's so abundant and like
Right.
taking away from the silhouette and the character that's there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I would say your models are, a lot of them are like hyper detailed, but not in a way that takes away or like almost like draws your attention to the wrong place almost, which
Well, I
is
may have
hard to do.
mentioned this in because we selected you, I think, for last year as one of our favorite hobbyists, or perhaps the year before I did
It was
blurs
last
together.
year. Yeah.
But I think I probably said it in there, but honestly, your work, one thing reminds me of is Simon Egan's sculpting because of that ability to sculpt in a whole lot of detail, but ones that are scaled in a way that it isn't just like ostentatious bullshit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It helps tell a story, but doesn't distract from like the personality and the character there. And I think
Right.
that's so important and can easily be lost in Games Workshop models at
It's also,
times.
yeah, I feel it's also very similar to like Karl Kopinski, one of the older great artists who added a lot of realism to Space Marines.
Amazing
And
illustrations.
yeah, and I feel a lot of your work kind of speaks to that in model form as well. You add a lot of really hyper realistic, hyper detailed aspects, but they just fit so well with the model and are so thoughtfully done that it just all adds up to, like, I feel a sum greater than like just the whole.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad that you brought up Karl Kopinski. He's one of my favorite Warhammer illustrators.
Yeah.
Um, I think he did a lot of the work in the third or fourth edition Chaos Space Marines Codex, and there's a
Hmm.
couple of illustrations of what are they the Raptor Marines with the claw feet?
Yeah.
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 There's a couple of illustrations of those claw-footed raptors coming in and like just grabbing guardsmen and like flying into them, and it's just
Yeah.
so cool. And the the forms of just like the claws and all of the scale of all the details on the models and the armor was just so fine and like
Mm-hmm.
a different scale than what the hero scale type has. It was scarier to me. The
Yeah.
more cartoony look, yeah.
I also really
Um,
liked in that era the artists were more likely to draw things out of their own imagination and put their own personality into it and not just like illustrate a model. And I
Yeah.
feel because that's what I like so much about conversions and stuff is people putting their own ideas into like a general archetype or 40K thing, but putting their own things like what they envision a Space Wolf to be and seeing some of that art do other things and give you ideas of stuff you could try to convert, I think was really cool rather than just like, we need a picture, exact model in that exact pose with this exact war gear. Like that's kind of stale and
Yeah.
doesn't do much for me.
yeah, yeah. There was a lot of wild ideas being thrown around back then, and they worked, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's when a lot of that stuff was being re-envisioned and
Yeah.
kind of setting the foundations, and it was a really cool thing happening. And I'm glad that we all kind of that it's there to reference back to. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's no matter where the line kind of goes, the history's there and the culture's there that we can all kind of draw back into it. And I mean, it's a shame sometimes when new minis come out and they're not exactly how you want, but I find it exciting to be able to make them how I want.
No, yeah,
I see it as a challenge. Yeah.
I think we've certainly over the years made it a almost like a mission of ours. Like, we certainly complain enough about things we think are wrong or could be better, but we've then often tried to then do work to kind of show like what we're talking about and like just kind of make some of those ideas a reality. And I think that's fun and challenging and interesting.
Yeah, like you turning Mark 10 into Mark 7.
Yeah.
That was huge. That was huge to see, because it was like, okay, you've already got the Primaris scale has a little bit more of a true scale look to it, but maybe it's a little bit more roundier and more playful looking than the other armors. And so by removing a few of those more friendlier aspects, the bubbly
roly-poly
spots,
details.
yeah, then exactly, it's you go from Buzz Lightyear to this Mark 7 war machine that it's just gonna like cold-blooded kill you.
That everyone
Step on your
loves.
skull.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's fair.
And I think once you get into trying to make some of those modifications, it maybe isn't quite as hard as you might think it is.
Yeah.
Like particularly if you have some experience with modeling putty and such too.
I feel I've also gotten to the point where I think where a lot of people, well, you don't have to be that worried. Like, if you're starting to cut stuff up, like, even if you really mess something up, you can always go back, and with a little work and patience, you can fix it. Like you were saying, cutting off that purity seal, like, you can...
Oh, yeah.
Like, even if, like, you were working and you mistakenly ruined it, it's like, well, it's just an opportunity to practice a little bit and turn it into something else. And I'm sure the way it is now, like, no, you'd paint it and no one would even know. And I like that aspect of a lot of the conversions. And like, it's often sort of amazing how you can take a relatively well-known and common model, and with like a few minor changes, like, you can really transform it into something different that is just so hard for people to recognize. And I think that is also kind of a fun and interesting challenge too.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I'm excited about with this librarian that I'm working on now. Is I'm going to try to capture I'm capturing the entire process, but I'm going to make videos that focus on really the main things that I did in order to break the mold of what it looks like. If you really want to make this a unique model, cut it here. It gives you all this freedom to do that. And yeah, just try to, in any way I can, try to encourage people to want to
get out there
color
and try
outside
stuff.
the lines. Yeah, exactly.
No, yeah, that's good. And I feel
guys,
people can't hear it enough.
Yeah, I am way up past my bedtime.
I hear you. I have to work tomorrow too. Well, it has been a pleasure to talk with you and ask you all sorts of questions. And
I feel like this was really just an icebreaker, right?
Yeah. Well, we will certainly
100%.
We'll certainly have to have you on again to talk. Who knows what? We could talk about all sorts of stuff. It would be great to sometime in the future, like, do some little collaborative project. Like, I'm sure we can think of something cool to do. Because
that would be fun.
All of us kind of have a similar vision and similar ideas about what's cool and how things could be modified and changed. So,
yeah, that would be cool. Even just doing like half of the project and shipping it over, and
I'll
like
make smaller firearms for some of your models.
Why don't you make a smaller Stormbolter for the librarian?
You can make me some smaller Stormbolters and I'd throw them on there.
Well, thank you for joining us. Everybody in the chat, thank you for coming along for the ride and your questions and comments. As we've sort of said a few times, get out there, cut up your models, start sculpting. Don't be too precious with things. And I think with a little practice, you'll be surprised how much you can accomplish with all of that.
Yep.
So, yeah, thanks again. And keep enjoying the hobby. Stay safe, stay healthy. We will talk to you again soon. Over and out.
Yep. Cheers, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.